Hello, hello, friends. Welcome to today's class. Thank you for joining me. We are in session. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Shout out to all of you who are here on time because we have a lot to cover. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my slides with you, but let me know who's in the building. If I know you guys, I want to shout you out a little bit, but in any case, I'm about to share my screen. All right. So I'm really excited for today. Wait, hold on. Before I share, let me just make sure I have the right screen up because I was about to share the wrong screen with y'all. Alrighty, here we go. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh, I see. Is that a hand up already? Oh, by the way, guys, ask questions today in the Q&A section. So if you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the Q&A because I'm not going to be going back and forth with the chat. If you can see my screen, just give me a 1 in the chat. I will look for the ones in the chat. But other than that, I'm going to be all in Q&A. All right. Thank you for letting me know, everybody. All right. So let's jump right into it. My name is Nikayla Matthews-Okome. If you don't know me, I am the host of the Side Hustle Pro podcast. I started that podcast back in 2016, and I quit my job to podcast full-time. Hi, Monique. To podcast full-time in 2017. So today I really want to share with you how to make money from your podcast. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And I want to make sure people understand what's not working in your podcast profit plan so that you can shift gears. So now let me jump right ahead. So first of all, I think I'm going to go over to I'm going to keep it here, but I want to make sure. All right. So cool. Because I'm sharing my Canva slides, you guys, and I'm just going to be real. Sometimes Canva can be a little glitchy for me. So let's cross our fingers. So let's jump right into it. Again, my goal today really is to help you to understand. If you just leave here, just understanding better how to monetize your podcast, I am happy. I'm satisfied. I feel like that's part of my mission in life as a podcaster. And then, if you want to learn more about working with me, awesome, great. I'm happy to do that as well and share that. And I will share a little bit more about that. So first of all, I got to do a quick story time of how I turned my podcast into a profitable side hustle. So if you're on my email list, first of all, you know that I like to keep costs low. All right. That's the first part of profit. Keep the costs low so the profit can be high. Right now, I am in my bedroom. This picture here on the screen, that's my living room. I have always podcast from home. But even before I started a podcast, I was kind of trying to figure things out. So for me, it started back in 2015. I posted this highlight reel, as many of us tend to do, sharing me graduating with my MBA from the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. I look super successful, as often is the case, very, very much just a highlight reel for social, because inside I was freaking out in this picture because this was it. I was getting ready to leave school. I was rejected from an internship that I thought would give me a full-time job. So here I'm graduating with no job, which no graduate ever wants to do. And I was moving back to DC to live with my then boyfriend, now husband, but with no income, barely any savings, feeling like a real failure. And if you've ever found yourself in life feeling like, how did I get here? Those feelings were the feelings I was having in that moment. So I said, I need to get my life together, all the way together. I knew it was time to build my personal brand, but I also wasn't sure what that entailed. So I had to really get to work. Alrighty. Okay. I was just checking that you all are seeing my slides. So I started just following online branding coaches, following people on IG, like you might be following the Side Hustle Pro account. Thank you so much. I went back to launching my tacky blog. If you've heard this story before, just stick with me because it's such an important story for you guys to understand. I was figuring it out. I didn't know where a blog would take me. Some of you don't know where a podcast would take you. You have to stay the course. At that point, I had content, but I didn't have any purpose. But the important thing was that I kept going. First of all, I got started and then I kept going. All right. You have been given a vision. You've been given a message for a reason. Your job now is to follow the path until you get to the why and to the how. So thank you for being here, because it's part of that process. I learned you have to be willing to take the first step, even when you don't know where it will lead. And I also learned that stepping outside of your comfort zone is where the magic happens. Some of you might not know that I am an introvert. This is why I love being home for my podcast. So being so out there, vocal, and, showing myself on social media, it's actually out of my comfort zone. It's not what I naturally like to do. It's a little bit easier for me because, again, I can do it from home. It's not like I'm in a big social space. But for any of you who feel like I'm an introvert, I don't know how to do all this, it is possible, all right? The magic happens outside of the comfort zone, though. So if you've started feeling this urge to create content and share your story with others, this class is for you. You are in the right place. So I'm going to show you the power of stepping outside of your comfort zone and how to make a living from doing it. So for me, after several months of blogging, I started to see a common thread. I started to see that I love sharing the stories of Black women side hustlers and entrepreneurs. And that's when the idea for my podcast, Side Hustle Pro, was born. So I launched it in 2016. And remember, I had started my blog in 2015. Sometimes you get the message and you have to keep walking for a while before you get the next assignment. So a year before launching Side Hustle Pro, I didn't even know what a podcast was, you guys. I didn't know. Listen to one. And here I was a year later, in the first 7 days after launching Side Hustle Pro, I was landing in the top charts. So here Side Hustle Pro is, old logo, shout out to the old logo, in the top 10 on the left, top 10 in marketing, and on the right, top 50 in business, launched at number 37, right above someone who I had invested in to learn from, Amy Porterfield. So Side Hustle Pro went on. It was featured by Apple that summer in New and Noteworthy. I went hard on promotion that summer. I launched my first little merch shop. And it was because I was starting to realize that I was onto something. And if I took this seriously, I could quit my job. Now, how many of you here want to quit your job to work on your podcast or another side hustle full-time, but don't know how to make a living from it? Let me see over in the chat. How many of you guys are here who would have that? Okay, me, I'm seeing people raise their hand. Yes, been there. Me, all caps. I am seeing it and I've been there, okay? I knew I wanted to do this, so I started studying podcast monetization. I went to conferences. I invested in courses to learn how to pitch sponsors. I even invested $1,197 in a 2-day event sponsorship intensive. What that means is this was not about podcast sponsorship. This person did not know anything about podcast CRM, mid-rolls, pre-rolls, none of that. But I knew that I was eager to learn anything at all about sponsorship. So that's how serious I was. And that's what I invested with as my first big ticket item. So because of that, 6 months after launching my podcast, I pitched my very first sponsor cold, meaning I didn't know anyone at the company. I started out with a customer service email address, as a matter of fact, and I earned my first $4,000 podcast sponsorship contract. So in December 2017, I was able to quit my job to podcast full time. Now, you're probably wondering, Nicaila, how in the world did this happen? Hold on, I'm going to share that. So as I said, Side Hustle Pro took off and it continued to take off once I quit my job. And in 2022, I was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame. And it all came because of the tips I'm about to share with y'all about how I graduated with no job and no money to now being in the Podcast Hall of Fame. So let's get right into it. See, that story time didn't take too long, right? So now let's get right into these tips. Here are my top tips for making money from your podcast. Feel free to record, feel free to take a picture, tag me on IG. I am not trying to gatekeep these, okay? So let's go. Tip number 1, get clear on who your audience is. It might sound really general, something you've heard before, but I don't think you've heard it enough. Okay, because most podcasters make this mistake. I keep seeing this. They think their podcast is about them. They start the podcast because they have something to talk about and they think that they need to talk about what they want to talk about. No, 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 no. You need to get into the mindset of the person who is listening. Yes, they're probably very similar to you. Guess what? 95% of my listeners are Black women. But are we all the same? No. Are we all at the same point in life at the same time in life? No. So I had to get to know them, and I show you how to interview your listener and to understand who your ideal and perfect listener is, so that you can make money down the line. You cannot make money unless you know who's listening to your show. So most podcasters also make this mistake. They try to target everyone. Example, all women. My show is for women. My show is for Black women. No, 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 sis. It's not for all Black women. I promise you. You're not talking to Gen Z women, are you? You're not talking to women over 70, are you? There are podcasts for each of those specific groups. So stop trying to target all men, all women, all millennials, all Gen Z. It's just not going to work. All moms. Oh, that's one I see a lot. I want to talk to moms. I want to talk to Black moms. They're not all the same. So we have to get you over that mistake, that you're over that hump of making this mistake, so that you can get to the dollars. All right. Another mistake that I see a lot is podcasters try to sell products or services or pitch sponsors without knowing who's listening to their show. Like I said, you cannot reach out to a sponsor and say, hey, sponsor my show. They're going to say, who's listening? What's her name? What's his name? What's their name? What's going on? What do they want? Why would they want to hear from us? Why should we pay you? Okay. You have to make that clear. So here's what you should do instead. Get to know your listener. And I'm going to share with you an example of someone who has gotten to know their listener and how they understand who this person is. So obviously, I've also done that with Side Hustle Pro. I've gotten on the phone. I've learned about this person. I actually have a whole profile of my listener, what she does for work, where she went to school, the side hustle that she's working on the side. And because I know her, I've been able to find more people like her, both on social media and then direct them over to the podcast. And that's how my Side Hustle Pro podcast was able to be expedited up those charts. So I want you to meet Tolu. So this is Tolu. Tolu is one of the fabulous Podcast Mogul students that I have been privileged to work with. And if you listen to Side Hustle Pro, you've also heard some of Tolu's story. But for those of you who haven't, so Tolu and I met when she had a lot of ideas, and she actually didn't have a podcast at all when she came over to my live class, just like you guys are doing. But once she actually joined Podcast Moguls and went through the lessons on refining your topic and refining your audience, she realized that, yes, she wanted to start a podcast about the industry she works in, which is UI, user interface design. But she also wanted to talk to people who had similar interests. So she had to get on the phone, learn more about this person. Who exactly is a person of color who's working in UI? What is their name? What is their pain point? What are they looking for more information on? So she did exactly that. She called her podcast the UI Narrative Podcast, and she was very clear about her target audience. She even shared a little bit of that inside of her podcast description, which is a hack for y'all when you're starting out. Make it plain. Use up every single character in that podcast description. No general blurbs here. Make it plain what your podcast is about, who it's for. And because Tolu did just that, guess what happened? Within months of launching her podcast from scratch, remember, from scratch, 0 downloads, no podcast, no logo, nothing. But within months, Google reached out to her. They came calling her to sponsor her show. She didn't have thousands of downloads per month, but she had a niche audience that they wanted to get in front of to help more people of color get into the UI space. So as Google was looking for this audience and podcasts that talk to this audience, guess who they came across? Tolu's podcast, because when they're searching those keywords, her podcast is coming up first. So that's the power of being targeted and also being communicating who you target. Okay, so that is step one, really understanding your audience so you can get those sponsorship dollars from a major brand like Google. Tip 2 is to get clear on what your audience wants. Maybe your audience doesn't want to hear from sponsors like Google, right? But how else are you going to know that unless you start to understand what they want? So a lot of podcasters make this mistake of selling things that nobody asked for. And they come to me and they're like, Nikayla, my ex isn't selling. Nobody clicked on my lead magnet, which, is a freebie when you say, oh, get this free ebook or whatever in my bio, and nobody clicks on it and nobody wants it. And it's happened to the best of us, right? That is something you want to avoid doing. You want to avoid spending all your time making something that nobody wants. So here's what you should do instead. Ask and test. Ask and test. And so now let's get into some things that you can test as a podcaster. So one of the easiest things to start out with is to get your reps in of talking about a product and actually selling a product is affiliate marketing. Now, affiliate marketing is great because it takes off the pressure of actually working with the brand and having deliverables and having to show them ROI. You can start here on the left. I've shared some brands that have affiliate programs. So if you just want to, on your own, use these brands, get your affiliate link and start to share it with your podcast audience, you can then go back to the brand in a few months and say, hey, I love this brand so much. I've been sharing it with my audience and I've gotten over X amount of people to sign up or, to visit the affiliate page. I think it would really make sense for my audience if you guys were to sponsor the show. Oh, and by the way, I included these brands because they're also sponsoring podcasts. So it would be in alignment when you're able to show your proof with your affiliate marketing traction that you got. So that's one kind of hack when you are still low with the downloads and you're still building up your audience. Start out with affiliate codes and really try to move those and move the needle. So choose products, first of all, that are going to resonate with your audience. And that's why it's important to know who your audience is. So if you're a business podcaster, or for me, I'm a side hustle podcaster, I'm talking to people who are trying to do as much as they can themselves because their business is not yet generating a whole ton of money. So they need to build their own website like a Squarespace, or they're reading books to learn as much as possible. So they're using Audible. All of these things are for my side hustlers. What about you? Do you have a lifestyle podcast? What are some brands that you use to make your life easier? I remember for a long time, there was a bra brand that was sponsoring all the podcasts out there. So I would try to get an affiliate code from them, right? And share and then get back to them. A hack is to go after brands that resonate with your audience and also they sponsor podcasts, because if they're not sponsoring podcasts yet, then you have to educate them and it's too much work. Make sure they have bought in to podcast sponsorship, okay? So the first step, choose the products. Second, promote authentically, okay? Genuinely recommend products you believe in to maintain credibility. Don't just choose products that have a high affiliate payout for each person you sign up, because your audience will be able to tell. And then you're going to track performance. So monitor your affiliate link clicks and conversions, and then optimize your strategy as you're seeing what works, what doesn't work. The next thing you can test is premium content and subscriptions. Now, I will give a disclaimer. A lot of people want to do the Patreons these days, or you can even create subscriptions within Apple Podcasts, but it is extremely hard. This is a hard one, right? To convince people to convince them to make your podcast a bill, essentially, right? Now, people do things like $5.99 tiers and $9.99 tiers, but if you think about what your goals are, then maybe the amount of people you have to sign up at $5.99 to make your profit goal, it might be more work than you're willing to do at that price point. At the same time, what I love about this option is you are getting your reps in, again, at learning to talk and tell people why something will be valuable. And that is a skill that is going to help you no matter which way you decide to monetize your podcast. So with premium content and subscriptions, you can offer things like bonus episodes to subscribers only. You can create an ad-free experience and provide an uninterrupted listening experience for premium members of your podcast. You can offer early access, so give subscribers first dibs on new episodes or special content. And you can also offer community access. So you can create a private community for paying members to interact and work. I love one of my favorite podcasts. Even though this was a free thing that they offered, they had something where it was like kind of like a co-working together. Like, let's all sit down and do our work. Whatever work you have to do, come on over and do it. And there are people who would opt in and pay for that. So premium content and subscriptions is another revenue model that you can test. And as you're doing this, remember, ask away. Whichever social platform you want to use, ask your audience, hey, would you guys want this? Hey, if I create a Patreon or a premium subscription, what would you guys want inside of it? What would you want to pay for? Blah, blah, blah. Keep the lines of communication open. Someone said this to me recently, and it was a great reminder that sometimes we just make life harder than it has to be. So we are like, I wonder what they want. I wonder. Just ask. Someone out there is willing to tell you, and more people than you expect. So that test out that revenue stream. Now let's get into another revenue stream that you can test, which is merchandise and products. So you can test out creating branded apparel. And I highly recommend doing this, again, low cost. I am the queen of low cost, all right? There are platforms like Teespring, all sorts of different platforms that you can use where you don't have to hold any inventory. So you can create it online, design it online, and if someone orders, it's fulfilled. But do not go out there and get all this merch design and then you have it somewhere and then you're trying to get rid of it, okay? So you can create branded apparel. This is from a favorite podcast who does apparel really, really well. Some of you might know it, The Read, right? So you can sell t-shirts, hoodies, hats, other clothing items featuring your podcast logo or your podcast phrases. I really love the phrases that the hosts on The Read came up with, as well as two of my favorite podcasters, Jade and Kia from Getting Grown. I love all their sayings and their merch designs. So I got to shout out my sisters. And that's another great example. Really create a community. And then as you create this community, you're going to see that they might start repeating some of the things you always say. Or if you have a catchphrase reminder that you share with your audience, they might start to really love that. And if it's not trademarked, because make sure it's not trademarked, then think about creating a slogan and then having that be an item of merch. One thing that Side Hustle Pro merch is, one of my more signature Side Hustle Pro pieces of merch is my gold mug, the Side Hustle Pro mug. So you can also create mugs, stickers, phone cases with podcast related designs. And then finally, you can also create digital products. This is one you will definitely want to ask your audience, what exactly do you want to learn from me? So in the beginning of my podcast, I would talk about myself growing my social media page, and people would want to know more. So I created one of my first freebies from that. I created a cold pitch email off of that, or how I created my first online course. All of these things that I created are always in direct response to feedback from my audience. So you can do the same thing as well. Ask and test. Now let's get into tip number 3, the creating what your audience wants. So you're testing, but when it's time to go all in on something, it's no longer a test. Like, you're going to invest and scale how much you're investing in this particular revenue stream. Then it's time to make sure it's something that your audience wants. And I also want to share with you another story from a Podcast Mogul student, because she has done this so well. As a matter of fact, there are people who have gone and invested in Lori from just hearing her story on Side Hustle Pro, because she is so clear on who her audience is, right? So Lori is someone who, she joined Podcast Moguls, and she actually had a podcast already. She was actually years deep into podcasting when she joined, but her podcast, it was called My American Melting Pot, and it was not targeted, it was not strategic. If you hear that name, like, do you even know what that means? You might think it's like a docuseries from PBS about different people coming to America and immigrating, right? Like, you have no idea what, to this day, I really don't know what that podcast was about, Lori. But she joined Podcast Moguls to learn how to make money podcasting, how to finally, just get this podcast up and running with revenue. And so as she went through the modules, she realized, I need to scrap this altogether, but also I want to quit my job. And because she revamped her podcast, in the process of doing that, she was able to quit her full-time job as a tenured professor and move to Spain to live full-time. And she did this because she launched a new podcast using her moguls training that is pretty much a sales funnel to attract creative writing students and coaching clients. So a sales funnel, for those you don't know, is something that gets people into your world and ultimately ends up with them being a buyer. So they come in for one thing, listening to the podcast completely free. They hear about how they can work with you, and then they decide to work with you. And so this has happened so organically with her podcast because she is an esteemed writer, award-winning writer, and she also ghostwrites for other authors. And it's a very lucrative field that people don't realize. So she now teaches people about this. She offers retreats in beautiful Spain. I swear every time I teach this, someone else reaches out and goes on this retreat, which I love. I've had my old roommate from Michigan go on this retreat, and this writing retreat that Lori has in Spain. So she offers beautiful experiences, intimate experiences, and then also coursing, teaching, consulting. And all because of her podcast, she now has clients. And so I want you guys to realize that whatever your podcast is about, if you want to gain clients from it, make sure that you're offering so much value that people understand how working with you can be valuable to them. Don't just be, selling them all the time and just create the podcast with yourself in mind. Like, I want to sell this thing, so I'm going to create a podcast about my business. That's actually not how it works. You want to take the approach that Lori has and use your moguls training to go about launching a strategy that is actually going to work. So I relate a lot to Lori's story because I distinctly remember when I had my I need to quit my job moments. I was sitting at my desk and I got this come to my office email from my boss at the time. Woo! I still get like, ugh, when I hear it, when I think back to it. So I was stressed and I went into the office. She told me that she learned I had a podcast and it looked like I was more interested in the podcast than in my job, blah, blah, blah. And mind you, we're really friends now because I just said, mind you, the podcast was on my resume when I started at this company, but I'd gotten a new boss. And so she had no idea about my background when she started. And so all of a sudden, my podcast looked like it was a threat, like it was something that I was more interested in than my job. So I wasn't fired that day. But that's when I knew I needed to make a decision. If you're at that crossroads where you're like, I need to choose between my side hustle and my full-time job, it's time to make a decision. Now, I wasn't fired that day. I didn't quit that day, but I made my decision that day. Important distinction. I didn't quit without a plan. So I got really serious about monetization. I started testing more. I hit the ground running. I was asking my audience more and more questions like, what do you guys want from me? Blah, 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 because I knew I needed to leave. Because if I was brought into that office again, I was going to be told that I had to stop doing my podcast. She actually called HR on me. I had to meet with HR and prove to them I wasn't breaking any rules. So it was stressful. And I decided to bet on me. I was not going to be tussling with HR for the rest of my life. So in December 2017, a year and a half after starting my podcast, I quit my job to podcast full time. This was the update. It's still up over on the Side Hustle Pro page. And my whole episode, I detailed what my plans were, how I made the decision, and how I prepared and all that good stuff. So you can go back and listen. And what I love about podcasting is it gave me freedom and flexibility to live life on my own terms. Now, you might see this picture on the left, and I'm not trying to promote some lifestyle where I travel all over the world. Actually, I do not travel all over the world every month. But I was able to finally take our honeymoon in Zanzibar. So that's where I am in this picture because I was now working for myself, because before I didn't have enough vacation days. But what I love the most about my podcast and the freedom and flexibility it has given me is keyword, the flexibility part, because I'm able to work from anywhere. And it's not always pretty. You see me on the left looking rough after my daughter was born last summer, just trying to make it out here. But my husband Moyo and I, we're both certified side hustlers. We're juggling parenting, careers, and our many entrepreneurial passions. So flexibility is huge for us. And for me, especially, because when times get hard and I'm like in between big checks, because, they have net 30 and net 90 sometimes with these payouts, and it can feel like, oh my gosh. And I'm tempted, like, maybe I should just get something more consistent. I think about the fact that, I don't want to have a cap on my maternity leave. I don't want to have a cap on how much time I can spend with my kids. I like being able to drop what I need to do and take them to the doctor and not be stressed about what my boss is going to think, right? So when I had a job, I had little to no family leave, but podcasting allows me to work from anywhere and have as much maternity leave as I desire while getting paid to podcast. And I just had to readjust myself to the payment cycles that come with entrepreneurship. So I've also learned when it comes to making money as a podcaster that there are two types of podcasters, right? You have the hobby podcaster who started a podcast for fun, has barely any downloads, spends countless hours just planning, recording, editing, like is putting a lot of work in, but has no rewards for your efforts. And then there's the podcast pro. The podcast pro is someone who starts a podcast with a vision and a strategy. They have a strategic marketing and profit plan. They invest in learning from experts to get better, and they see the fruits of their labor with monetization and more. And for those of you who are not interested in learning a little bit more about actually becoming a podcast pro, this is your opportunity to leave. I don't want to talk about anything you're not interested in, but I do want to share with you how I work with podcasters to increase their revenue and to continue to become a podcast pro. So, which kind of podcaster are you? Because if you're serious and you're a serious podcast pro ready to ramp up your podcast profit, I want to share more with you about Podcast Moguls. So Podcast Moguls is now open for enrollment, and it is my proven coaching program that Lori took, that Tolu took, for podcasters who want to have a strategic market plan and a profit plan to explode their podcast audience and make money podcasting. So you can head over to sidehustlepro.co/join right now to join Podcast Moguls. I'm doing this class myself, so can someone drop it in there for me? Drop the hyperlink, because unfortunately, I am not able to drop it yet, but I'll drop it in a second. So let me just share with you a little bit more about the program. So Podcast Moguls is for you if you want to develop your podcast marketing strategy, develop your podcast profit plan, grow your podcast audience, pitch and land paid sponsors, and monetize your show even without sponsors. All right. Sponsors are not the only way to monetize your show. Plus, Podcast Moguls is for you if you want to get coached by me. So inside of Podcast Moguls is the course itself. So these are the course modules. We go through your topic, audience, workflow, marketing, paid advertising, email list, sponsorship, pitching, negotiation, and monetization without sponsors. And then the actual process has 3 parts to it. So part 1 is the course, which is the 9-module podcast transformation curriculum, which includes video lessons, tutorials, templates, swipe files, and guides. Swipe files meaning like I give you the template, you just plug and play your own info. Part 2 is the community, which is our private community where you can ask questions and get answers outside of our group coaching calls. And then you can post your wins, challenges, questions, all of that, get your feedback. And by the way, that's me in there answering and responding to you. And then part 3 is the coaching. Again, with me, we meet monthly for live video group coaching calls. You receive personal guidance from me during these calls. You can ask questions in between that you want answered. If you can't make the calls, which are at every 3rd Tuesday at 1, if you can't make the calls, you can submit your questions in advance and I will answer them live and you can watch the replay. So this is just a quick testimonial from Shirley McAlpine. She's the host of the She's Got Drive podcast, and she shares her experience inside of Podcast Moguls. She said she joined, and I had at that point 25,000 downloads, and in the last 3 months, I'm now at 46,000 downloads. Her strategy absolutely works. So as you can see, within 3 months in Podcast Moguls, she nearly doubled her downloads, and I want to see the same for you. This is someone who had a podcast already and joined. And then we have Fritz, because not just the ladies out there. but we have Fritz of the Coin Gamma podcast, and he said that because of Podcast Moguls, I was able to speak at over 5 conferences last year, even being flown in internationally to speak at conferences, and it all came because of the podcast. So I really love Fritz's story because he is, again, a low-key guy like myself, not trying to put all this attention on himself, but he just geeks out when it comes to topics on cryptocurrency, business, money, and all those things. And so he decided to start a podcast because he was just overflowing with conversation about it. And then because of the podcast and because of going through the modules and applying the steps that he learned, it was inevitable. People discovered him and wanted to have him come out and speak. He was not pitching himself, all right? And he was flown out to speak internationally. So that is the power of truly understanding how to structure your content, how to get your content out there, and then how to make yourself appealing to people who want to hire you to speak, pay to be on your podcast, or what have you, pay to sponsor your podcast. So inside of Podcast Moguls, just to break it down for you, you're getting monthly live coaching sessions from me. A one-on-one coaching session is $1,000, but you're getting 4 coaching sessions inside the program, not priced individually, 4 group coaching sessions, not priced individually. You're getting annual community access to our private community. Some people price this at $197 a month, like after your first year in the program, but you have lifetime access for the community as well. Nothing, you don't have to pay anything separate for each renewal year. You get all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits that are customized for a podcast. And you guys know I spent $1,197 just on learning sponsorship. You get my guest pitch template, so how to reach out to guests, where to begin, how to go about it, and that is valued upwards of $597 by itself and from other podcasters. Plus, you're getting my Master of the Gram program, which is my tailored course all about Instagram growth, and that's priced at $297 by itself. You're also getting the Goal Getter Action Plan, which is my productivity course priced at $98. And the total value of this, I just had to do it for you. You know, we got to do this thing. I wrap it all up. I show you how much it's worth. Almost $9,000 of value is coming out of this program, and you can get started today for just $297. That's a 4-payment plan where you get access to my monthly life coaching, my annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters, media kits, guest pitch templates, Master the Gram, Goal Getter Action Plan. Like I said, it's over at sidehustlepro.co/join. Let me go ahead and put that in the chat in a second. So if you pay in full, you do receive pay in full bonuses, you guys. So the pay in full price is $997. And yes, you do save by paying in full, okay? You do save. It is a little bit more for the 4-payment plan just because of, you know, the normal thing of, you know, with payment plans. So here are the pay in full bonuses. My pitch email that landed me my first $4,000 in sponsorship. We talked about this. You get that email. You get my 5-day brand name blitz that landed me in the top charts in week 1. That's a $297 value. You get my pitch email to Apple that landed me in the new and noteworthy section as a new indie podcaster, not on a network. Plus, you get my pitch email that landed me my first international speaking engagement where I got flown out, all expenses paid, to Barbados. That was an awesome, awesome trip. Plus, I am now offering Pay in Full Elite, you guys. If you would like a one-on-one strategy session with me to get your personalized podcast assessment, marketing recommendations, and your personalized podcast profit plan, I am now accepting the first 10 people to register for Pay in Full Elite. This is something people ask me all the time. Thank you so much, Deja. This is something people ask me all the time, like, can I work with you? Can I get a one-on-one with you? And for a long time, I didn't offer it. I due to bandwidth, and now I'm offering it, but again, due to bandwidth, limited it to the first 10 people to register only. So if you would like one-on-one coaching from me, you can head over to sidehustlepro.co/join and Pay in Full. Do the Pay in Full Elite. Pay in Full Elite is $1997. Honestly, all of Podcast Mogul should be $1997. People tell me to raise the price all the time, but I have not yet raised the price, and you can get in now with Pay in Full Elite. You get everything inside of Podcast Moguls, monthly live coaching sessions, annual community access, all of my sponsorship pitch letters and media kits, my guest pitch templates, Master the Gram, Goal Getter Action Plan, my sponsor pitch emails, branding blitz, Apple Podcast pitch, speaking engagement pitch, plus your personalized one-on-one strategy session with me. We will get personally into your podcast audit so I can give you an assessment of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, what you need to switch up to get profitable this year. I'm giving you my marketing recommendations and your personalized podcast profit plan. So if that interests you, make sure to go over and select Pay in Full Elite over on the sidehustlepro.co/join page so that you can work with me one-on-one. I have never offered this before, and this is only for the first 10 people. So make sure you get in there. All right. And there is no payment plan for Pay in Full Elite. Pay in Full Elite is what it says, Pay in Full Elite. So I want to share with you guys some more of what's inside of Podcast Moguls by just sharing with you who has taken this program. So some of you might know Nia Clark. She is an esteemed broadcast journalist. She started the Dreams of Black Wall Street podcast, and she actually was another person who came into the program, and she had a completely different podcast. Again, I don't even remember what it was or what it was about, because as soon as she came in, we had to get to work and revamp that. And this is what she had to share once she relaunched. She said, nearly 2 weeks ago, my podcast, Black Wall Street 1921, which chronicles the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, passed 100,000 downloads in just 4 months. When I started this project, I didn't know how it would be received, because let's face it, talking about race in America, let alone the worst incident of racial violence in America, is not easy. Now, more and more people are willing to confront this ugly part of our past and hopefully create a brighter future. And the popularity of my podcast prompted BBC News to reach out to me, interview me, and produce a 4-minute short video with me. So that right there is the power of Podcast Moguls in a nutshell, you guys. So the course, Danny Marie just asked, it is 9 modules. It is 8 weeks. That's how much time is budgeted for you to go through it. You have 4 calls, and we meet monthly. So you have 4 monthly coaching calls included. And quiet as it's kept, open secret, I really don't refuse anyone from the calls. So you can come back anytime you want, but technically you get 4 calls with the course. And I also want to share with you that Nia said, I have to say, I really was not expecting my podcast to take off the way it did. I could never imagine my podcast would do that well. And really, it's because of what I've learned in Podcast Moguls. So I know some of you are like doing podcasts and you're not sure if this could be your story, right? You're not sure if, based on the effort you have or the time you have, if this could happen, but I'm telling you, it can happen for you. And the reason I know this is because I was doing Side Hustle Pro when I started after work, an hour there, an hour there. I was someone who used my weekends to chill with my fiance at the time, now not husband. I was not someone who was slaving on this all weekend long. So I fit it into 7 hours, sometimes 10 or whatever per week, and I was still able to scale it. So it is something that is very doable. You can find the time that works for you. What's important is that and that's why I include Goal Getter Action Plan. What's important is that you make sure that you are optimizing the time you spend. So we're about to get into Q&A. So let me just reiterate that you can join Podcast Moguls today. All right. You have 2 options. You can keep trying to DIY your podcast with tips gathered all over social media and YouTube. Shout out to YouTube. I love it too, but it's not going to give you a strategic plan. Or option 2, you can decide to make podcasting a priority and get my coaching to know exactly where to start and what steps to take. All right. So option 1 is for my hobby podcasters, and option 2 is for my podcast pros. So just a reminder of everything you're getting. And then your 2 options, Pay in Full Elite or the 4 payment plan, or you can just pay in full, no elite, but you can go over to sidehustlepro.co right now. All right, I was just checking if I had any more slides. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so that I can make sure that I give you guys the there we go, stop share, so I can give you guys the link. All right, can you guys still see me? Give me and we're about to go into a Q&A. Latika says, do we still get the one-on-one if you don't have a podcast already? I can get value out of the elite if you don't already have it. Yes, you can still do the one-on-one. It's like I said, Tolu started without a podcast. So what the elite can do for you if you have not yet started your podcast is to make sure you're starting with the right frame of mind and taking the right steps. Because if you don't want to start and end up having to do a whole new podcast all over again, like some of my students have, because they just named it anything, they had any kind of artwork, they don't know who their audience is, they're like on a hamster wheel trying to promote this podcast that's talking to everybody, that's not focused, and I don't want that for you. So we would use our one-on-one session to go through a launch plan, go through who you want to target and why, what you want to be known for, and to get you on the path to working on your podcast profit plan, because your foundational steps would be completely ironed out so that you can get to the podcast profit more quickly. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just drop that link real quick for y'all. And then we can get into Q&A. Give me a 1 on the chat if this was helpful for y'all. I feel like this is the fastest I've ever done it too, so we can get to Q&A. 111. All right. I love to see that. All right, so now let's get over to Q&A. Michelle wants to know, what type of equipment would you suggest? So I have an equipment overview for you inside of Podcast Moguls, but I also have a freebie. If you want that, just email me. I don't have the link handy right now where I link to all the equipment I use. So I have the low tier, mid tier, and high tier suggestions. I started with like a ATR 2100 mic. If you Google that on Amazon, it'll come up. And then I used the Yeti for a little bit. Now I use the Shure, which is super expensive. You don't have to start with that whatsoever. So I recommend a mic, any USB headphones or AirPods, your laptop or desktop, whatever you're using. And then depending on where you are, you want to do some soundproofing, and you could do that with anything as cheap as pillows all the way to some pads around the room to muffle sound and external sound. So that's how you want to get started. And then for recording, you will need a recording software that works for you. I say that works for you because, again, I make suggestions. Like I've done GarageBand, I've done Skype and Ecamm. Now I use Riverside.fm, and you guys can use code HustlePro if you want to use Riverside and get 10% off of any plan that you sign up with. So now I use that to record my podcast. Chioma says, can't see picture. I hope you were able to see the picture. Were you guys able to see my slides? Because I'm seeing people saying they weren't seeing it. So let me know if you guys were able to see my slides. Okay, yes. Okay, cool. All righty. Lori's podcast is called Read, Write. What is it? As soon as you said that that slipped my mind. Read, Write, and Create, I believe. Hold on. Read, Write, and Create. Yep. All right. You know how you as soon as someone asks you a question, it goes out of your head. All right. Replay will be sent out, you guys. And thank you guys for joining who had to drop. Latika's question, do you still get the one-on-one? Yeah. If you have a podcast already, yes, you can still join Podcast Moguls Elite. Elite is for anyone who wants that one-on-one coaching time from me, that one-on-one strategy session from me. Monique says, my husband wants to start a podcast with me together. Can both of us go through the process together, or just one of us? You can go through together. So the Podcast Moguls Elite, Podcast Moguls fee is per podcast, not per person. What type of equipment should we purchase? Okay, Michelle, I just answered that one. All right, so let me know if you have any specific question regarding equipment. Anonymous says, if the first 10 people fill up paying full Elite, will this package be offered again in the near future? I can never guarantee what will be offered in the near future, but so I do recommend that you hop on this if you can. Bandwidth does change. And again, I was being honest in saying that I don't often offer one-on-one coaching. This past May, June, July is the first time I've done it in years. So hop on it. They just said I had to step out. Okay, so for the tips, oh, sorry, I didn't recap the tips, you guys, but I will be sending out the replay. I'll be sure to remember to do that if I do a class again soon. All right. Eviana says, financially, if we can only afford the pay in full or subscription plan, is there a follow-up opportunity to pay for one-on-one later down the line? Yes. If that is the case and you are a podcast moguls, we can revisit that. We can, absolutely. I can honor that. And you guys can hold me to that. I will honor that. So, but make sure that you do go ahead and enroll on this class so that I can honor that for you. Michelle says, yes. Okay. Yes. You have another question, Michelle? Go ahead and ask it if so. Danny says, how often do you open enrollment? I don't open on a cadence anymore, Danny. It is truly when I am ready. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you, but if you're on my email list, you'll know the next time, okay? B. Richard says, where and how do you store your content? I store my content on a cloud server. So you can use things like Box or Dropbox or, whatever platform that you prefer. And then my podcast itself, I've hosted on Libsyn. By the way, you can use code Hustle Pro on Libsyn also if you want to get started and get your first month and a half off free. So that is how I go about storage. All right, let me know if I missed anything. Hold on. All right. Let's see if I answered every question. If I didn't answer your question, please ask it again because I thought that I did, but I'm just going through now and asking and going through them again. All righty. Michelle says, very excited. Yay. Welcome, welcome. Again, I can't check who's joining right now because I'm doing this one by myself today, but welcome to everyone joining. I cannot wait to work with you. So let's see, just a few final questions. Does the marketing plan include video? Oh, absolutely. I've been doing videos since 2021. I have some do's and don'ts. Absolutely, Monique. How do you know if we made it to the first 10? I will email you. And then once the 10 have joined, I will be taking it off. Okay. So it will no longer be an option. But maybe not right away. I have to jump on that right now, actually. How do we know? Okay. So that's how you know. And then any final questions? We have a few more minutes left. So if you would like to ask a final question, please let me know. Again, I'm going to, Victoria Tyrell says, do you think there's a podcast niche that won't sell? Victoria, I can honestly say that I don't think that there is a podcast niche that won't sell. I have seen a lot in these podcast streets, and I'm telling you, there's a podcast for everyone. There is a podcast for everyone. If there's something out there that can be taught, that can be talked about, there's a niche for it. So I would love to know what niche you're thinking about, though, or have in mind. It sounds to me like sometimes we say things like that, and this is not just you, Victoria. Or not necessarily you, but I think sometimes people want to preemptively save themselves from disappointment by saying, oh, this won't work, or maybe my podcast isn't growing because I'm just in a bad niche, or this niche doesn't sell. And that's not the case. Like, let's sit down together and let's go through. A lot of times it's an audience mismatch problem where you think you're talking to one person and you're actually talking to someone else. So, I have a podcast mogul student, for example, who has a podcast called Banking on Girls. And actually, she just started her podcast within the last year and already spoke in front of the UN. Okay. So her podcast is all about financial literacy for girls. And one of the things that we talked about is the fact that although it's about financial literacy for girls, her target audience is really their moms, okay? Because of who she is, the demographic of her, the host, which matters, by the way. You can't be like 70 years old trying to talk to Gen Z. You have to understand who is going to be attracted to your podcast by you being the host and also the subject that you're talking about. So a lot of times the audience mismatch, and I help you clarify that. Anonymous attendee, if you're thinking of writing a book, which order would you recommend? Book prior to podcast, podcast prior to book? I would recommend podcast prior to book because the podcast is going to help you to flesh out your topics and your chapters to understand what do people want to know about. What are their questions? What are they really interested in? Sometimes we think, oh, they want to know how I did X or more about this. You might say, oh, I'm going to teach them how to raise their credit score. When actually, first of all, they're more interested in the episodes where you talk about your financial journey, what you struggled with, and you can get to the credit score later, but you want to do a big portion of the book sharing your own and infusing your own journey. An example of this, and what really comes to mind, is my friend Jamila. She has the Journey to Launch podcast. She started around the same time as me, 2017, and she just released her book last November. She was actually on the podcast 2023. So after 6 years of podcasting, she realized how she needed to package the information, and she was able to learn more about her audience in order to publish that book. Now, book publishing, it's a hard work. It's hard work. You have to do a lot of marketing. So you really want to make sure you understand your audience to, one, present it to a publisher, unless you're self-publishing. If you want to be attracted to a publisher, building up an audience through your podcast will help you secure a better, more lucrative deal. All right, guys. Last questions, calling all questions before it's time to go, because I'm about to wrap up. Shout out to the replay viewers, and then I will send you guys the replay after this. Thank you so much for joining. This was awesome. I really enjoyed the questions and the energy you brought. I'm going to head over to the chat for a little bit just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Danny says, Tanya says, how do you know when to narrow down your niche if you don't have a large audience yet? It depends on what you are, the subject of your podcast right now, and what you're currently thinking of narrowing down and what niches you're considering. Danny says, by the way, I enjoyed your upload yesterday and got a lot of my podcast friends to watch it. Oh, thank you so much. Slad says, I'm looking to do a live show. What do you think about doing a live show in order to grow your audience? That's an interesting approach. I think that promoting a live show and getting people to attend, unless it's free, is a heavy lift without somewhat of an audience. So as long as you have an audience and you are able to do the live show at low cost, I'm a low cost girl, then I would say, hey, why not? But usually I would like to know a little bit more about your podcast audience and make sure that you can support doing that. So from there, if you have any other questions, you guys, we're going to wrap up now, but feel free to email me at hi@sidehustlepro.co if you have any additional questions. Thank you so much for being in the building, and welcome again to all who have joined. And with that, I will talk to you guys later.